Welcome back. In our previous lessons, we created a number of objects. We were able to create classes. We created a class here, class vehicle as well, where we haven't done anything. We also created a constructor. Right here. We created fields, these ones. We created parameters, these ones. And earlier we had also created properties that were supposed to receive or to get and set the values of our fields, but we changed and we instead have the fields working as properties. In our next tutorial, before we left, actually I told you that we shall be looking at functions. I lied. They're not called functions here, but they are called methods. Method looks so much like a constructor, only that a method will have a return type. Creating a method, as I said, is similar to a constructor. What we shall do, shall have it as a public, then it has a return value. This one will be a string, then a name. I'll call it statements, and then we write whatever it has to execute here. Our method, this one, will return something so simple. It will be something like a greeting. So when we call this method, we want to return, for example, for the meantime, a greeting. We shall return, how are you? And that's all. So if we want to call this method when we are in programs, remember all our programs will be executed in this class called programs. So we have to use the constructor still. We have to use the objects rather we had created, like Julie and James. For example, we shall say console.writeLine, and we pass a value. The value we are going to pass this time is going to be a method. Our method, let's say James.statements. Remember, if we call a method should be different. It should have these braces here. That's when it will run. Now if you run our method, this is what we will get. How are you? This is what we got. I want to put something like a border. Let me write console.writeLine. Just want to put something like that. And maybe a blank line. I'll remove this. Let me run this. I'll show you what I've just been doing. I just want as if we are starting fresh here, this blank line here and these dotted lines. So we've been able to call our method right here, but in a method you can also pass a value to a method, just like we passed values to our constructor here, where we passed these values. We are not going to create another method, or we are not going to give it another name. We shall give it the same name. This method is still called statements, but we shall instead change a few items. in this method we shall be passing a value, say a value called name, and this is called overloading, where you have a same method name, same return type, but with different parameters. Then we will be having two or more methods with the same name but returning something different. This is how we overload methods in C#. Now with this I want us to give it a name, say the name we would have passed, then concatenate it with with what we have here. Let's run this. I'll show you how it works. No, we shouldn't run it. We have to do something here. We are going to have the same method, console.writeLine. Maybe let's use Julie this time. Julie.statements. And here it is asking us, it knows we have two methods already. Which one do we want to use? Is it the first one or the second one? The first one looks like this, string employee.statements, and the second one looks like this, string employee.statements. We have to pass a string name. We want to use the second one, so in here we shall pass a name, Julie, and we close the two braces. Remember, we have this first one here to close this, and then the second one here to close this one. We can run this and see what happens. Julie, how are you? This one above was just how are you, because it was not picking any value. We can even do better than that. Instead of all the time writing something like this, the name of the person, like Julie.name, then your salary is, and then write Julie.salary again. We can instead have another overload that receives, it doesn't receive a string but receives it receives an object. What am I talking about? So let's have another method. You see, when I paste it here, it is complaining because these are two methods of the same items. Even if I decided to change this to maybe salary, it would still complain. What matters most is what you type in here. If the data types are the same, if the parameters are the same, then this one will be, you'll get an error right here. Here we want to change it and instead have an object like employee. We are passing an object instead of just a string. This one is now complaining, it doesn't know what name is. Remember, this in a method you cannot call a value, you cannot call a parameter which is in another method. For example, here we have name here, but this method here doesn't know about name. These parameters can only work in here, but they can't work outside. That is that's how far they can go. Here, instead of writing name, we shall write employee.name. I want to change, instead of typing this the way it is, instead of always typing, for example, if you had 50 employees, would still go doing the same, the employee and then .name, all the employees will do the same, but we can have that in just one method. employee.name, and then we write here your salary is, concatenate with I've not talked about concatenation, but concatenation is where you joined two items. This one is something known by this class here. You don't put it in quotation marks. Things you put in quotation marks, these are strings. I didn't explain this, but if you see, for example, salary here, when I was passing salary, I didn't put it in a string because it's not a string. I didn't put it in a quotation mark because it's not a string. It's a decimal type, or int, decimal. All these figures will not be in quotation marks. Plus the items that are known by your class, things like employee, things like new, these are inbuilt functions of C#. You don't put in quotation marks. Basically, the only things you put in quotation marks, these are strings, the ones you're trying to pass, or when you're passing strings to your data types. So I'm putting this in a string, in a quotation mark, because it is a string. So name, then add it to, not addition but concatenation, that's the right word, because addition is different from concatenation. Concatenate it with, again here we shall put salary, rather employee dot salary. This will help us a great deal, because now if we call this method here, look at it this way, we shall now say console.writeLine Julie.statements, and we pass a value. Does it tell us we have 19? Okay. And we pass a value which is Julie.statements, and now it is telling us that we have three methods, have three method overloads. We should choose one. We shall choose one that accepts an object, and that should be really fine. And let me see how many brackets we have. Have this. How many have we closed? Okay, opened 1, 2, 3, then we have to close 3. Let's run this again and see what happens. When you look at this, Julie Nesmo, your salary is 350. How are you? Did I say how are you anywhere? Let me look at that again. Where do we get the how are you from? Julie.statement, it passes an object. Alright, we passed another function into another function. Anyway, this is something to think about, but what we are supposed to do here, not to have all these parameters, but this is something quite interesting still. Where we have statements, it is receiving this parameter here, and then it is calling another method. This method that is being called here, it calls another method within another method. It calls this method here, but we don't need to call another method as per now. Let's change this. instead pass Julie like that. That should be fine now. So here we are. Julie Nesmo, your salary is that. It's the same as this. So if you want to write for another employee, say James, red line, then we pass James dot statements. We pass a value to our method. We shall pass again James, and we'll run this. It's the same. What we saved ourselves from is typing these things all the time. Instead of passing, or instead of typing this all the time, we just call a method which is our statements, and it's receiving an object, so that work is made easier using the overloads. In this tutorial, we've seen methods and their overloads, and then how we can pass different items to methods. In this method, we are not passing anything, but we are returning something. In this method here, we are passing a parameter, and then we return something plus that parameter. And yet in this method, we are passing an object. In our next tutorial, we shall be looking at some of the inbuilt objects. We shall see how to use some of the inbuilt objects. That's the end of our today's lesson. Thanks for watching. Have a good evening.